I have no idea, man.
How old are you now?
I'll be 40 this year.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
That's the magic number.
You know, since the day I started, I didn't start till I was 23.
Yeah.
And
So let's tell your story, because it's a fascinating story, because I love a guy whose life is fucked up and then he figures something out and then becomes a role model. And in a lot of ways, that's what you've done.
Yeah, it's a long story, and I'm actually in the process of writing my autobiography right now, which I've been working on pretty consistently for the last 5 years. Something that, I really was doing it for myself in a lot of ways, to have an understanding of the things that I've been through and the things that I've learned and processed and acquired over these years, which is, in a lot of ways, it's been extremely rewarding doing all of this, but it's also been very difficult, very painful and emotional, going back through all of these things that happened to me in my childhood and my upbringing, and things that I'm, even to this day, I'm still trying to process and understand a lot of. And where were we going with all this? My story.
Yeah, well, your story of not starting until you're 23, and before that, too much partying.
Yeah. So, to summarize a lot of this, I grew up in a lot of different places, moved around a lot. My parents split up very early. Me, my mother, and four brothers, sisters. We basically lived in somebody's basement in the beginning, and we're living on welfare and bouncing around from place to place, and so much of that shut me down emotionally. And when I was a kid, from what I'm told, I've really not much recollection of my childhood, because I've blocked so much of this out, and that's why it's been really difficult for me to write this book, because I don't really have many memories. I have almost no memories of that time in my life where I felt like a child, that carefreeness of childhood. And I've had to, talk to siblings and friends from back then, and look through photo albums, and slowly things start coming together. And, that's why a lot of this has been really therapeutic. But I always loved fighting. I always loved boxing and was very intrigued by it. And martial arts, Bruce Lee was always a hero of mine. And but I hated violence coming up. I hated it, but I was intrigued by it. So a really good friend of mine, we lived in Colorado for about a year or two. He would get into fights on a weekly basis in school, and I was fascinated by it. And I'm like, wow, you're so brave and so strong. And I felt like such a weak. I allowed weakness to overtake me throughout the events of my life. And I was very shy. I didn't talk. I was always athletic and that kind of thing. But as far as confrontation and that, it just shut me down. And I didn't like it. It upset me a lot. When people would be angry with me. And so I had this strange dynamic where I was drawn to fighting, and I was drawn to violence in one way, but I also hated it a lot and was scared by it. But over the years, I was like, oh, maybe I'll try boxing one day, and that'd be really cool. I was fascinated watching two people in the ring, and all these people are watching, and they're there with each other, regardless of their skill level. And just thinking about what it must be like in there to do that, and it fascinated me. But again, like I said, I love martial arts, so I wanted to be able to kick people. I wanted to be able to elbow people and knee people, and I never saw any fighting that was like that. As I was coming up, you'd see Taekwondo and karate and a lot of point sparring and that kind of thing, and forms, and even that I thought was fascinating. But I wanted to fight like boxers did. And I just never really saw anything like that. And one day, 94, this is right when we moved to Vegas, I was watching ESPN at 2 a.m, and they used to have Thai fights on once in a while. And this fight came on. They're like, oh, this next fight is a Muay Thai fight between so-and-so. And when that started, I was immediately hooked. It hit something in me that just lit me on fire. I was like, this is everything that I've been looking for. This is something so different, and it just spoke to my soul. And it fascinated me, and I was like, if I am ever going to do this, that's going to be it. It's going to be Muay Thai. But, for various reasons, it scared me. One, I didn't know how I'd be able to afford it. I didn't know if my parents would even let me. And, coming up the way I did, I was partying and drinking all the time. Even at that, I started drinking when I was like 12 years old.
Holy shit.
Yeah. And by the time I was probably 18, I was physically dependent alcoholic. I had to drink every day in order to keep my nerves from shaking. My hands would tremor.
How much were you drinking?
A lot. Every day I would drink. Every day I would drink.
All day?
Throughout the day a little bit. At night I would just be pounding 40s.
Fuck.
Constantly, and that's all that I did. That's all me and my friends did, was we would just drink. We would drink every day. And it was
how did you wean yourself off that?
Starting Muay Thai is what did it. As I said, I learned about it in '94. Over the years, every once in a while, I'd see a fight and I'd be like, I want to do this so bad. And in '98, I actually started calling around gyms in Vegas. I was like, maybe I'm going to find a place to do this. And for me, it was one of those things where if I'm going to do it, I want to do it right, and I want to do it to fight. And if I'm going to do it to fight, what is the fastest way to get there? And I was like, I need to take one-on-one lessons. I wanted to learn from a Thai, and that was not to say, like Americans or anybody else can't teach it, but I was like, if you're going to learn it, you might as well learn it from the source. And the only place in Vegas that taught Muay Thai, one of the only places that even taught Muay Thai, and definitely the only place that had Thai instructors, was Master Toddy's gym. And I called the gym, went down and talked to one of the instructors. And when he let me know how expensive it was going to be, I was like, there's just no way. There's no way I'm going to be able to do this. And for me, I also knew that if I am going to go after this, I'm going to need to stop drinking, stop partying, completely alter my entire existence. I'm probably going to lose all my friends. Everyone's going to laugh at me. I didn't even know how serious I took myself. I was like, I laugh at me when I say this, and if you knew me back then, you'd probably laugh too. Like, what do you mean you're going to fight? Are you stupid? That's the stupidest thing I could ever think of. And one of my best friends, Mo, he, for whatever reason, this one night we were up on the roof drinking and smoking weed, and we got to talking just about life. And he was actually born with a heart defect. I can't remember the exact name of the disease that he had, but he was in hospitals his whole life. He was eventually going to need to get a heart transplant. And he's like, what do you want to do with your life? I looked at him like he was asking me what I want to do when I got to the moon. I'm like, what do you mean, what do I want to do with my life? And I was like, well, I always wanted to fight. And expecting him to laugh at me about this, he was like, well, why don't you? Like, why don't you do it? And, I told him, well, I feel old already. I was 18 at the time. I already felt ancient then, and I told him all my reasons and all my fears and doubts and all these things. He's like, you know what, man? He's like, if anybody can do it, you can. He's like, I think you should. And that always stuck with me. I was like, yeah, maybe I can. And in that moment, I felt very motivated and wanted to do it. But by, continuing to drink and all these other things, I just suppressed it into the back of my mind. And then about a year later, he was in the hospital and he needed to get a heart transplant. He was basically at that point was like, you're going to be here until you get one or you're going to die. And, I don't think any of us realized how serious it was, or maybe we just didn't want to. He ended up passing away while he was waiting for the transplant. And that just obviously devastated me to no end. And through that night, through my drunken coping, I was like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to go after this dream. My friend, he didn't even get a chance to fail at a dream, and I'm too scared to even try for no reason, just out of fear. That's literally my only reason not to do this, other than, financial and all those other surface things. But it really just boiled down to fear. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna go after this for him. He didn't get a chance to live. I'm gonna live for the both of us. But unfortunately, his death sent me even harder down that downward spiral of alcohol and depression. And 3 years later, I just had a realization one day. I was like, if he was still alive, he'd beat the fuck out of me for wasting my life. I've been wasting my life for 21 years because I'm afraid. I'm afraid, and I'm too afraid to fail. I'm too afraid of all these stupid reasons that all of us give ourselves in order to make ourselves feel better about not going after things. But really, they're just that. They're just excuses. They're just things that make you feel better. And they're bullshit. They're all bullshit. Almost every excuse we have is total bullshit, because there's people with those excuses and with all those reasons and more, and they do it. And like, what is your excuse? And it just smacked me in the face one day. And I was at that point when I could not ignore it any longer. And this was going into 2003. So I was like, made it my New Year's resolution to do this. And, one night I was sitting down with my father, and he'd get into these long talks with me, because I was always very quiet, and he'd like take me off to the side, and his way to kind of talk to me and get to know me better. And he was like, so why don't you tell me something you've never told anybody? I'm like, what do you mean? Like, what can I killed somebody when I was little? And I'm like racking my brain what I could possibly tell him. And, that kept replaying in my mind. You want to fight, you want to fight, you want to fight. And I very quietly was like, oh, I want to fight one day. And he's like, what? He's like, I want to fight. And he's like, what do you mean you want to fight? And, I told him, and he's like, well, why don't you? And I told him all these reasons. He's like, well, I cannot help you with all of your fears and doubts in this, but look, I'll make a deal with you. If you quit drinking and dedicate yourself to this, I'll take care of all the financial things in order to let you do this. And he's like, we got a deal? And I was like, all right, yeah. And he's like, he points down. I was drinking a 40 at the time. He's like, what about that drink in your hand? And I was like, well, I was going to start tomorrow, so, I don't want to, maybe I can finish this, all right. But, I understood even at that age, like, you can't put things off like that. It's like, you're going to do it. If you're serious about it, you're going to do it now. So I dumped out the rest of the 40 and the sink he had in there, and 2 days later, I got into the gym. And
was it hard to wean yourself off the alcohol, though, if you were physically dependent on it?
It was both extremely difficult, yet I was so focused on this goal that none of those, I had to overcome so much, not just the physical dependency on alcohol, but my lifestyle, and change so many things. But I'd been putting this off for so long that I knew there was no time for me to waste. I was so focused on this that, like, once I made that switch in my mind, like, I'm going to go after this, and there's nothing that's going to stop me. And I've wasted so many years already that everything I'm doing is going to be playing catch up. There's no way for me to get to, like, I'd look at, like Sunshine guys like that, and I'd be like, I'm never going to get there. So everything that I do has to be to get me closer to this goal. And I can't allow, my physical dependency or my doubts or any of these things slow me down, because everything I'm doing, I have to play catch up, and having that focus allowed me to overcome all of those physical and emotional and mental challenges. And of course, that's not to say it was easy. It was extremely difficult. But you got two choices. You can allow these things to slow you down and hinder you and weaken you, or you can say, I'm going to go forward anyway. It doesn't matter how afraid I am. It doesn't matter how hurt I am. It doesn't matter how tired I am. This is what I want. And I'm going to put everything that I have into this, so that way, when I'm done, when my life is over, when I can't do this anymore, I can look back and have no regrets that I didn't allow these things to slow me down. I didn't allow the excuses that we all have hinder me and keep me from doing this, because one day we're going to wake up and realize we could have gone after these things, and we didn't because of X, Y, and Z, but really those things aren't anything,
Do you stop and think about those moments when you first started? Because that's a profound life shift.
Yeah.
Right? To go from being a guy who's kind of aimless and partying a lot, but knowing that you should do something with your life, to finally doing something. Mm-hmm. Like, what was it like when you finally started training? What did it feel like when you actually? Because had you done anything athletic before that?
You know, I was always athletic my whole life. I was always really good at sports. I hated the team aspect of things, though. I despised being on a team of any kind. I love playing sports for the love of it, you know. But anytime I was on like a team, I just hated it. I despised it. And, you know, by the time I was like, I think 12, I completely turned my back on anything team related, because it felt like it just ruined all the beautiful things about the physicality of athletics. You know, it put it hindered me in a lot of ways, you know, and having to rely on other people, you know, was always a big thing.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, it doesn't matter how hard I work, because this person might not have worked at all.
Right.
And, you know, that's why I was so drawn to fighting, because it's even though you do have a team, of course, it really is, everything is on you, the good and the bad. There's nothing you can point to all these other things, but it's really just you. So yeah, I think back and I look back to that time. And
what was the first day like?
It was.
Do you remember?
Yeah, I do. It was. So I started out just doing private lessons. I didn't even start doing classes until maybe 6 months to a year. So I was doing private lessons on a daily basis. My trainer, Master Chan, who's one of Tadi's original instructors, he had me in the gym at like 6 a.m. So this is January in Vegas, which is brutally cold, which, you know, not a lot of people realize. And their gym had no heat. All the windows were like broken, so there's no insulation or anything. And I don't know. I was so excited. Yeah, I was so nervous, and, you know, obviously I wanted to do really well and perform, and everything was so new that I didn't really have a lot. I couldn't even really process it. So there wasn't really a lot of thought that was going into it. I was just excited. I was just constantly excited and motivated, and wanted to. My whole goal was to fight. You know, I was like, I want to fight, even if it's only one time. So everything I did was with that mentality. You know, I was like, I want to get better. I want to do everything that I can at every moment. And I put every ounce of myself into every second of the day was geared towards this. You know, I was singularly focused on this goal. Can
you remember the first day?
Yeah.
Can you remember the first day of footwork and holding your hands
so,
up?
The first day, he has me up in the ring. It must have been maybe the second or third day, because I know there was other people there, and maybe they were just hitting the bag and stuff. So there was a couple of the other pro fighters there, they were pro fighters. I was nobody. And I'm up in the ring, and so this is day one. He's like, shadow box. I'd never done anything fighting related. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, I don't even know what that is. You know what I'm saying? Like, what do you mean shadow box? So like, so much of everything in my career has been like thrown into the deep end, can you swim kind of thing, and like this forced learning curve. You know, I didn't get babied into anything. You know, it's like, all right, shadow box, go ahead. And all these fighters are like staring at me, watching me. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing, but whatever. You know, it was traumatic in a lot of ways, but having to confront that and face that, particularly me, because I'm naturally a very shy person, a person that doesn't speak ever to anybody. I mean, even now, you know, I'm still very quiet, but if you knew me back then, I was basically a mute, you know, and I had no interaction with especially strangers and people I didn't know, and even the ones that I do, I'd still barely even communicate with. So all of this was so foreign to me. This was like an alternate universe that I was in, and it was so scary. But it was like, you don't have a choice. Like, get up there and do it, or get the fuck out of here. Yeah. You know what I mean? So there wasn't time for me to really think about it or like even be really nervous about it. It's like, do it. Shadowbox. Like, and this instructor, he barely spoke English, so it's not like I can like say, hey, well, I don't really know what I'm doing, and maybe you can show me some things. Just like go. And that's very much a Thai approach. It's like, just do it. I'm not going to tell you how. I'm not going to explain the steps. Just go kick the bag or hit it. Just do it. And yeah, it was scary.
But then once you got some momentum, once you had a couple of weeks under your belt, and this started becoming a real normal part of your life, what was that feeling like where you realized like, hey, I'm fucking actually doing this? Like this is actually happening.
Well, every day I was taking significant jumps. I mean, as I said, I've always been naturally athletic, so I was picking this up like quick, really quick. I mean, even within a few weeks, people thought I'd been doing it for years. And a lot of that, does come from my physicality, but my drive to do it and to have my sights set so high that I was taking these quantum leaps every single day. So over the weeks and over the months, it really felt like I was like, oh, I'm on track. I'm on the path I should be on. I'm gonna be amazing at this. This is great. I'm natural at this. I'm gonna be a champion one day. I'm gonna just be crushing people. And everything was pointing in that direction. With my development, and started eventually going into the classes and sparring and all of those kinds of things. And it was always like, when do I get to fight? When do I get to fight? When do I get to fight? And I think it was 9 months in, I finally got to fight, and I was like, oh, this is it. This is my moment. I'm gonna go out there. I'm gonna crush this dude, and then I'm gonna be on my way to the big time. Not that there even back then there's no big time. There was no. This was before YouTube. This is before anyone even knew what Muay Thai was. You had to tell everybody you did kickboxing, basically, which just crushed my soul every time. Every time say, well, it's like kickboxing. And for Muay Thai people to have to say that it's devastating. It's like someone say, well, it's like karate. You know what I mean? Which no disrespect to any of these other arts, but to say that it's that in order to help people, most of the time I would just say, yeah, it's like kickboxing, and instead of having to explain to them what it is. And so 9 months in, I got there was going to be a fight in Salt Lake City, Utah, and a bunch of the other people at the gym were fighting as well, and we were all going to go up there and compete.
Is this an amateur fight?
Yeah. And,
headgear?
No. Yes, headgear, but the funny thing was we had headgear, but we didn't have shin guards. We had 8-ounce gloves, and we had knees to the head.
Really?
Which was a trip. So anyway, so I was like, oh yeah, great, we get to fight, and I was so excited. And my pops and Gina, and we drove up there, and like I said, I really felt like I was on my way. But when we got there, the guy that I was originally supposed to fight, I don't remember if he backed out or it was just that he was closer in weight to somebody else. And that was kind of the thing back then. We would just show up at places and be like, you got to fight for me or don't you? And they didn't. And I was like, oh my God, I was devastated. I'm like, I did all this work. I was so ready. And now I don't have a fight. And, my trainer's like, well, is there somebody else you can get? And so the promoter, he's calling around. And then finally he's like, well, there's one guy that's going to take it, but he outweighs you by 20 pounds, and he's had about 30 fights already. I was like, let's do it. I don't give a fuck, man. I was like, I didn't do all this for nothing. You know what I'm saying? And, and again, that was just our mentality. The way that we came up and the people that we came up under was, you fight anytime, anywhere, anyone, any style, any weight. It doesn't matter. And so, yeah, I didn't even really think about it as far as like that goes. I was like, I get to fight. That's fucking awesome, man. And I felt I felt confident in a way, but it's also that you have no idea what you're really doing. Like, you can train your whole life, but if you've never fought, you don't know anything. You have no concept of what it's like to be in there. You have the hardest sparring in the world with a complete stranger, and it's night and day between a real fight and sparring. And so it's like, yeah, you want to feel confident going in there, but you have no concept of what it is. So it's really just fake. It's fake confidence. And I got fucking crushed, man. So I got there, and I have no concept of like pacing myself or anything. So I'm like sprinting at this guy. And in like 30 seconds, I was just done. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I could barely even see. It felt like I was underwater. And it was the worst thing in the world, because nothing this guy was doing was hurting me. And every time he would hit me, the whole crowd's like, oh, and all I wanted to do was just say, it's nothing bothering me. This isn't hurting. Like, I wanted to like tell everybody, like, this isn't hurting me. I can't breathe. Like, all I'm really trying to do is not pass out right now. And I mean, like, physically, I couldn't do anything, but I was able to last for a while and do a couple decent things in there. But by the third round, he was just battering me, kneed me in the face, and he just kept clenching me up and was just kneeing the piss out of me, and there was nothing I could do. And they finally stopped it in the third round, and I was devastated, man. I was devastated, and I remember walking, like, as I was walking back to the locker room, everyone in the crowd was like cheering for me and like, oh, that was awesome, man. Like good job. I'm like, what is wrong with these people? Like, that wasn't good. That was so terrible. That was terrible. And I was like laying in the back. I'm bleeding all over the place. And my opponent comes in. He's like, dude, that was your first fight? I was like, yeah. He's like, man, I hate to see you in like a year or two. He's like, that was amazing. And, that really stuck with me, that one, that he said that, and also just the impact I saw that you could have on people, that it's not necessarily about whether you win or lose, that it's what you show in there. It's the heart that you show. It's the spirit that you show. And, I had like a day or two when I was like, maybe this just isn't for me. I thought that I was going to be so good at this. I thought that I was just going to like skyrocket to the top, and I got crushed, man. I didn't even make it out of the fight, and like, maybe this isn't for me. But I was forced to face that day one. Like, do you want to do this, regardless of how good you are, regardless of you win? If you can't win, and maybe you can't be the best in the world, do you still want to do this? Yeah, I fucking do. I love this so much. And me having to face that so early on was extremely significant. I saw so many of the people I trained with would go on these undefeated streaks, like 10, 15, 20 fights, but inevitably you will lose. And if you haven't had to confront that early on, eventually you do. Most of those people never fought again, or just like crushed them mentally where they weren't able to overcome it. But I had to deal with that the first day and overcome it and be like, you know what? That doesn't matter. I'm gonna bust my ass in the gym and make sure that never happens again. And I went on to win like 19, 20 fights in a row from there. And, that was really a significant moment in my career where I had to confront the reality of this. And, that so much of fighting is a perfect metaphor for things in life. Like, if you really want something, you can't always focus on what the results are or the immediate results, like winning and losing and all of these things. So much of that is just on the surface ego level of things. Yeah. And when you break it all down, like, why are you doing this? I'm doing this because I love it. I'm doing this to improve myself. I'm doing this because it's what keeps me healthy, mentally, physically, spiritually, and all of these things. And that's the most important thing. And yes, it was an extreme motivator to be better and, not to let that happen to me again. But, it really made things clear to me early on, like, what's important here.
My main objective and everything I've been embarking on and been involving myself with, it's all been because of a fresh start. I feel fresh. I feel new. I feel that nothing could stop me. Nothing could be in my way. And it's just an awesome feeling.
So this is from doing that one DMT experience just sent you into.
Well, I did it one
person.
time, but I did it many times that day.
Right.
You know, but yeah, this really I don't know what it is. I'm trying to figure it out, but I've changed. But I just don't know how.
Yeah. I describe it for a lot of people. It's like resetting a computer. You reset a computer, you have a fresh new desktop. And there's only one folder on the desktop. And that folder says, my old bullshit.
This is, listen, stop. I'm saying to myself right now, sometimes I wonder, this new feeling that I'm possessing right now, is it a real feeling? Does this stuff really help? Or am I lying to myself again till the next moment, that next feeling come to do some drugs, to be with somebody else? What's really going on? Is that feeling going to come back? Because at this moment, that feeling feel like it's never coming back.
It can never come back if you decide that it's never coming back. But you have to make that decision pretty much every day. But you can never come back if you want. Or you could slip into the old ways. That's what a lot of people do. When a lot of people fall into drug addictions, relapsing, when they relapse, they're not physically addicted when they're relapsed. Obviously, they're clean. And then they decide to go back in. It's because there's comfort in those old patterns. Because this new way of life is just, they get anxiety. They feel like it's a lot of pressure to stay clean.
Oh, so explain it. I hate that. I always hated that. Oh, wait, I never wanted to do drugs, but then I do them again. I never wanted. I hate it. No.
Yeah.
No, come on. You understand what I'm saying? No, I don't want.
Yeah.
Fuck, I don't want that.
Next
and then once you do that, then you're going all out now. You got the liquor there, the girl. Oh, man, this is just a dark, vicious cycle. It's real dark.
Yeah, it's self-destructive.
Real dark, yeah. It's all about ego inflating and self-deprecating, self-destruction.
It also alleviates you from the responsibility of improving.
100%.
That pressure of like keeping it together, staying sober, being disciplined, all that stuff. Once it's gone, it's gone. Like, I'm just fucking crazy. I'm crazy. This is just what I do. I'm crazy. And it's easy to fall into that trap, and that's what happens to a lot of people who relapse with drugs.
I never want to go back to that again. That's just a no-win situation.
That's one of the great things about marijuana that people don't understand. They think that a drug is a drug is a drug. They're all falling under the same category. But you can use marijuana and just be peaceful and not chaotic, and the opposite. It'll make you think more about the consequences of ruining your life. You don't have any problem at all with porn. You think porn is fine and porn is recreational. A lot of people would push back against that. And a lot of people would push back and they would say that it's damaging to young women, that it objectifies women in a harmful way, and that it changes the way young people in particularly look at sex, and that they mirror and model themselves after these very unrealistic scenarios that are depicted in these films. What do you think about that?
Right. I've never said that I have no issue with porn. I would just say I'm not anti-porn in that I think that pornography has a time and place. I think if you're an adult, and in terms of sex more broadly, whatever's consensual, that's your business. But I do think, for especially young children, I don't think that's good for their development. I don't think that that's a way that people should learn about what sex is going to be like, because pornography is not indicative of what real life sex is. And I think for people who are concerned that pornography is there's so many different angles in terms of the criticisms of porn, but say one common criticism is that pornography makes men interested in things that are, potentially degrading to women. I do think there is some pornography that is not very nice in the way it depicts women, for sure. But I don't think viewing that as what makes men misogynistic or disrespectful of their partners. I think that's something that is inherent in them. And again, as someone who's worked with sex offenders, antisociality is more predictive of someone's behavior and their views of women. It's not about being exposed to porn. Because I think most pro-social men, if they see something that's very degrading and awful to women, they're going to say, that's horrible and I don't want to look at that. Right?
Yeah. I think the issue is not really with porn as much as the issue is with human beings. I think that porn is in a lot of ways like many things, like alcohol, for instance. You can have a drink every now and then, or you can drink all day long and ruin your life. What is the problem? Is the problem the alcohol, or is it your behavior? Is it the human being? I think it's a human being, and human beings' obsessive, compulsive behavior and people's addiction to things. The addiction to pornography seems to be an issue. And so some people's idea is, well, you should ban pornography. Well, that's sort of the same argument for banning alcohol, but it doesn't really work. Like, you can't really tell people what to do if some people don't have a problem with it. Like, there's some people that enjoy porn every now and then. They watch porn. They'd rather masturbate than have a relationship or whatever. Maybe they just don't want to deal with people, but they're horny. I don't know, what for whatever reason. But there's nothing wrong with that. But there is something wrong for them with the action of watching porn all day and disassociating and being weird. But again, I don't think it's a porn problem. I think it's a human problem. It's the same thing as gambling. There's a lot of things that people get really obsessed with and they get addicted to. I don't think the problem is the individual thing. This has always been my take on porn, or and really on a lot of what we call vices. I don't think the problem is the things themselves. And I not just respect, I support individual choices. I love the fact that we have freedom. You could do whatever you want. I think you should be able to do anything. You should, as long as people aren't getting hurt by it. I wonder why we have this perspective on porn, though, that we don't have on other things. Because, like, porn in many ways should be just people having sex. People and filming it, right? People obviously like sex. So why is it such a big deal to film it? Why is it such a big deal to show it to other people? It's a very strange aspect of being a human being, that this one thing that so many people are obsessed with and literally go out of their way to be successful so they can get more sex. Like, that is, like, if you ask men, like, if men could not have sex, how many men would be driving Ferraris and taking selfies in front of private jets? How about zero, right? If this is why they're doing it. They're signaling that they have wealth. They're trying to make themselves attractive. Why are they trying to do that? For status. For what? Well, maybe to show off to other men, but more likely to show off to whoever they're attracted to, whether it's the opposite sex or the same sex. They're trying to get sex. So why is it that filming sex is so taboo?
Well, okay, to go back to your point about porn addiction, number one, there's no evidence for pornography addiction in that.
I need to introduce you to some of my friends. You don't know what you're talking about.
I don't
I'll give you evidence.
I don't doubt that for some people, porn is a problem, for sure. And like you're saying, there's some people who watch for hours. In the research I was doing before, there are some people I would talk to who would literally sit and watch pornography 8-12 hours a day, and it's affecting work. They're up super late. They can't get up in the morning. It's affecting their relationships. That's not healthy. That's definitely excessive. I don't deny that exists, but that's not porn. That's not addiction. That's usually procrastination. It's procrastination.
Well, oh, wow. That's a weird point of view. I think they're addicted to it. They're obsessed with it. If you're obsessed with something, don't you think that that's an addiction? I mean, are we splitting hairs here?
I guess it depends on if you're meaning addiction as in like a colloquial use of the word, maybe. But in terms of if you're talking about drug and alcohol addiction, it's not, because drug and alcohol addiction is characterized by tolerance and withdrawal. So some people will argue, like I said, with pornography, that if they watch it and they start watching more extreme versions of it, they're saying that this is, my tolerance. But if you actually sit and have a conversation with those people, they'll say, actually, this is what I've liked all along. It's just, it took me a while to accept that. So there's no tolerance, and you don't see people having withdrawal when they stop.
Well, they might not have physical withdrawal, but they do get obsessed with it, and they do have a compulsion to look at it. I know people that if they take, a day from porn, they think about it all the time, and they can't wait to get alone to watch it. I think it is an addiction, and I think it is similar to a drug addiction the same way gambling is similar to a drug addiction. There's an internal drug. There's something that's going on in your mind that you are getting addicted to. The excitement, the endorphins that you get from gambling. I think there's many people that get those same excitement and that same excitement or similar and endorphins from watching pornography and masturbating.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's rewarding, but right. I think for a lot of people, it's a coping strategy. And if you give them different coping strategies, suddenly they're not reliant on pornography to feel better or to deal with stress.
But isn't that a strategy for getting over addiction? Like you would admit there's an addiction to gambling?
I think it is recognized now, I believe.
But don't you think that's a similar situation, because there is no withdrawal, and it's not like you reach a certain point where you need more to get you off, because I mean, or I guess it is really, right? Because they gamble bigger and bigger numbers. But you don't. What I'm saying is you don't really develop a tolerance to gambling, right? But it is a gambling addiction.
But the thing is with people with so-called pornography addiction, and research has shown this, if you give them other coping skills and ways to deal with stress in their life, or you teach them, they give them assertiveness training so that they are able to speak up about what's bothering them instead of turning to pornography as a way to feel better, it actually cuts down on how much their viewing time and how much they rely on it.
That's interesting, and I wonder if you get healthy user bias, because if you're getting someone that is willing to admit and accept the fact that they do have some sort of a sex or a pornography addiction, that's not the average person. Like I think there's a lot of people out there that are addicted to porn, but you never hear from them because there's so much shame attached to it.
Right, but I think someone who is spending 8 to 12 hours a day, that's a lot of time. That's pretty far in terms of severity. So yeah, I don't think that for everyone who uses porn as a coping strategy, it's necessarily going to be that extreme. But my issue is that this has been portrayed as something that is definitive and that we should treat it. Like I think it was maybe 2 years ago, everyone was talking about porn addiction, and within the field, people who work with people with problems with pornography in a therapeutic context will say, that it's not an addiction. There are other things usually going on in someone's life. And those are the things that you need to talk about when you sit down with a therapist.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I guess I would agree that for a lot of people, it probably is procrastination. And there's probably a lot of other factors as well. But then again, people get horny. So like, even if you find all these other coping mechanisms, but you get horny, you're probably going to watch porn again. So you'll slide right back into it.
Well,
or you can just.
There's no solution.
I don't know. I mean, it's a weird thing as opposed to gambling, right? Like you're not going to get horny for gambling, right? There's not like an equivalent thing where you build up this thing inside your body that needs to take a risk, right? But whereas with pornography, like it's particularly with men, you do sort of build up this need to release.
Right. And then it becomes a question of, can they integrate this back into their life in a healthy way without it becoming destructive again? Yeah.
So why do you think it is that we have this weird take on sex? Because it's a weird thing that it seems to be, there's no problem with sex, but filming sex and showing sex is where things get strange.
Because sex is still considered stigmatized and it's taboo. And even when you're a sex scientist, there's so much stigma around that. You would think that as a scientist that there would be some sort of removal of that perception, but no. So I think, I write a lot about sex positivity also. I think if we were to decrease all the stigma around human sexuality, that would help in so many ways.
Wow. So what do you got here for me?
So we were going to talk about, I was really interested to talk to you because we talked last time about my book about depression, lost connections. And one of the things that was suggested to me is we talk about the book I wrote about addiction and the war on drugs. And I really...
Was that out last time you came?
Yeah. So that was a book that came out a few years before. It's just come out in a new edition where there's loads of extra material, particularly about the opioid crisis. And it's interesting because...
So you added to it?
Yeah, loads of new stuff, because that book's about 5 years old now. And although with loads of new stuff now, but... it was something I cared about for this really personal reason, in that one of my earliest memories is of trying to wake up one of my relatives and not being able to. I didn't understand why then, because I was a little boy. But as I got older, I realised we had drug addiction in my family. And it got to the point where I was writing Chasing the Scream, my book about the drug war, I guess I started 8 years ago. And some of the people I love were in a really shitty condition, terrible state. And I was trying to figure out what to do. Nothing I was doing was working. Nothing I was doing was helping. And I decided, right, okay, well, there are lots of people all over the world who are trying to deal with this problem. I want to go and meet with them, talk with them. So I ended up going on this big journey. It took 3 years. I travelled over 30,000 miles. I wanted to sit with, people who'd been through addiction. It actually led to a lot of other aspects of the war on drugs, which I think are as important as what we do about addiction. And I wanted to sit with places that had the harshest possible policies, like we mentioned Arizona, where I went out with these women who are made to go out on chain gangs and are humiliated and tormented. Vietnam, where they make people with addiction problems go into literally forced labor camps. And the places that had the most compassionate possible policies, like Portugal, where they decriminalized all drugs with incredible results. Switzerland, where they legalized heroin, incredible results. And I guess I ended up just spending so much time with such a crazy mixture of people, from a transgendered crack dealer in Brooklyn who ended up actually being one of the smartest people I know, to a hitman for the deadliest Mexican drug cartel, who's definitely not one of the smartest people I know. And I learned loads of things, but I guess the heart of what I learned is just so much of what we've been told about this for so long. It's now 100 years since we started fighting the war on drugs in this country, and it was then imposed on the rest of the world. So much of what we're told is wrong. Drugs aren't what we think they are. Addiction isn't what we think it is. The war on drugs isn't what we think it is. And the alternatives to the war on drugs aren't what we think they are. So in some ways, it's kind of daunting to go all over the world and realize so much of what we take for granted isn't right, but that opens up this whole exciting other set of possibilities.
The main reason why people assume that people do drugs is to escape reality. What do you think is the primary thing that they're running from?
So you've got to separate out two things. And this surprised me because my family's experience was pretty bad and catastrophic addiction. But most drug use, even the main drug war body in the world, the UN Office of Drug Control, admits that 90% of all currently banned drug use is what they call non-problematic. So the person isn't addicted and it doesn't damage their health, right? So 90%. So let's set that aside. We'll come back to that.
Okay.
There's like 90% that's recreational use, where people use because it makes their lives better.
Right.
Then you've got the
like coffee, sip of wine at work, or
ecstasy, or a whole range of currently cannabis, a whole range of currently illegal drugs. In most cases, there are some people who have addictions to cannabis. But you then got to ask, well, what's happening with this 10% who have got a problem, right? What's going on? And one of the things that really blew my mind in the research for Chasing the Scream was realizing I had deeply misunderstood what addiction is. I had misunderstood the thing I thought I had been seeing in front of me since I was a kid, right? So most people, let's think about heroin addiction because that was close to me. Most people, if we stop the next 20 people to walk past your studio and we said to them, what causes heroin addiction? I think they'd look at us like we were stupid and they'd say, well, the clue's in the name, dipshit, right? Heroin causes heroin addiction. We've been told this story for 100 years. It's become totally part of our common sense, right? We think if we took the next 20 people after that who walked past the studio and we injected them all with heroin every day for a month, at the end of that month, they'd all be heroin addicts for a simple reason. There's chemical hooks in heroin that their bodies would start to desperately physically need. And we think that, a lot of people think that's what addiction is, right? It's this physical hunger for the chemical hook inside the drug, right? There is some reality to chemical hooks. They exist, they're real, but that's actually a very small part of what's going on. The first thing that alerted me to the fact there's something wrong with that story we've been told is when it was explained to me by loads of doctors in Britain, where I'm from. If you step out into the street and you get hit by a truck and you break your hip, you'll be taken to hospital and you'll be given loads of a drug called diamorphine. Diamorphine is heroin, right? It's the medical name for heroin. It's the stuff you'll be given in hospital is much better than the shit you buy on the street because it's medically pure. It's not contaminated. If what we think about addiction is right, that it's just caused by exposure to the drug, what should be happening to all these people in British hospitals who are being given loads of heroin, right? Anyone watching this podcast who's got a British grandmother who's had a hip replacement operation, your grandmother's taken a shit ton of heroin, right? If what we think is right, that addiction is caused primarily by exposure to the chemical hooks, loads of these people should be leaving hospital and trying to score on the streets, right? This has been studied very carefully. It virtually never happens, right? And when I learned that, it just seemed so weird to me. I thought it couldn't possibly be true, right? How could it be you've got someone in a hospital bed who's taking loads of really potent heroin, they don't become addicted, and in the alleyway outside, you've got someone who's using actually a weaker form of the drug who becomes addicted. How can that be? What's happening here? And I only began to understand it when I went to Vancouver and met this amazing man called Professor Bruce Alexander, who did an experiment that's really transformed how we think about addiction all over the world. It's led to a new way of thinking and loads of new evidence. So Professor Alexander explained to me this story that we've been told, right, that addiction is caused by the chemical hooks primarily, comes from a series of experiments that were done earlier in the 20th century. They're really simple experiments. Your viewers can try them at home if they're feeling a little bit shitty today, right? You take a rat, you put it in a cage, and you give it 2 water bottles. One is just water, and the other is water laced with either heroin or cocaine. You might remember in the 1980s, there's a famous Partnership for Drug-Free America ad that shows this experiment, right? And the rat in this cage starts to drink always prefers the heroin water and almost always kills itself within a week or 2, right? So there you go. That's our story. You're exposed to the drug, it takes you over, and then you just die, right? But in the 70s, Professor Alexander comes along and says he was working with people with addiction problems. And he's like, well, hang on a minute. We put these rats alone in an empty cage. They've got nothing that makes life meaningful for rats, right? What would happen if we did this differently? So he built a cage that he called Rat Park, which is basically like heaven for rats, right? They got loads of friends, they got loads of cheese, they got loads of coloured balls, they can have loads of sex. Anything a rat finds meaningful in life is there in Rat Park. And they've got both the water bottles, the normal water and the drug water. And of course they try both. They don't know what's in them. This is the fascinating thing. In Rat Park, they don't like the water very much. None of them ever use it compulsively.
The heroin water.
Yeah, the heroin water. None of them ever use it compulsively. None of them ever overdose. So you go from almost 100% compulsive use and death by overdose when their lives are shitty to none when they have the things that make life meaningful. Now, there's loads of human examples I'm sure we'll talk about, but the main thing I took from this is that the opposite of addiction is not sobriety. The opposite of addiction is connection. We have to ask ourselves, what are the contexts in which people become addicted? Because there are some contexts where people find these drugs extremely addictive, and there are some contexts where they don't become addicted at all. There's something, the drug plays a role. Chemical hooks are real. I can talk about how we know that. They play some role, but they're actually a surprisingly small role of small amount of what's going on. We know this from, there's so many examples, but I'll give you another one. At the same time as Rat Park, there was an experiment going on that everyone listening to this will have heard of, the Vietnam War, right? In Vietnam, shitloads of American troops were using heroin, right? It was very easy to get it out there. Insanely, they had cracked down on cannabis, and so people had moved to heroin because sniffer dogs can't detect heroin as easily as cannabis. So cannabis was everywhere. Heroin was everywhere. Loads of American troops were using it. And if you look at what people said at the time, the authorities, the Nixon White House, they were shitting themselves because they believe this chemical hooks theory of addiction. So they're like, fuck, when this war ends, we're going to have, 500,000 heroin addicts on the streets of the United States. There was a really good study that followed these men home, and it found that the vast majority of them just stopped, right? They didn't go to rehab, most of them. They didn't go into horrific withdrawal. Some of them had an uncomfortable flu-like symptoms, but most of them just stopped. Now, if you believe this old theory that chemical hooks take you over, that makes no sense. But if you understand what Professor Alexander is saying and that all the new evidence about addiction that I go through in Chasing the Scream, it makes perfect sense, right? You, me, everyone in this area, if I took any of us and put us in a horrific pestilential jungle where we don't want to be, and I made you kill a load of people and potentially die at any moment, you would find heroin much more appealing than you do now, right? If we want to understand why people turn to painkillers, we've got to understand why they're in pain, right? And the core of addiction, I learned from these amazing experts all over the world, the core of addiction is about not wanting to be present in your life because your life is too painful a place to be. And once you understand that, you can see why what we've been doing is such a disaster, right? Because the theory we have with the war on drugs, think about Arizona, we can talk about that more, but like I say, I went to this nightmare prison, Estrella prison in Phoenix, Arizona, where people are humiliated. And the theory behind that, part of the theory behind the war on drugs is, if you've got people who are addicted, you've got to inflict pain on them to, give them an incentive to stop, right? But once you understand that pain is in fact the fuel of addiction, is in fact the primary cause of addiction, you can see why sometimes people say that doesn't work. Truth is much worse, right? That makes addiction worse. Those women I went out with and spent all that time with who were, humiliated. I remember in that prison, we come back from being on the chain gang where sometimes they have to dig graves. They weren't doing that the day I was there. They had to collect garbage. One of the days I was there, but we come back, and normally with prisons, as a journalist, they don't want to show you anything, right? You have to kind of really finagle to get them to show you anything. In this prison, it's like a pantomime of cruelty. They want to show it to you. The whole point is to humiliate these people, right? So the women I've been talking to and the men were really terrified of what they called the hole, right? It's the solitary block. And so I said to the guards, will you show me the hole? I was sure they'd say no. They're like, yeah, sure, come on, we'll show you. So we go around to the hole, and these women who put there for the most like trivial infractions, like having a cigarette, it's literally a hole, right? It's like a concrete block. You're on your own. There's nothing in it. There's a tiny window where you can see sunlight. No TV, nothing. And I remember speaking to a woman who was in this and suddenly thinking, this is the closest you could get to an exact human recreation of the cages that guaranteed addiction in rats, right? And this is what we're doing, thinking it will stop these women being addicted. It's the system we've built. Dr. Gabor Mate, an amazing guy, said to me, if negative consequences stopped addiction, there wouldn't be a single addict in the world, right? What have people with addiction problems not suffered? What humiliation have they not endured? So we've got this, I think we've got to really shift our perspective on what addiction is. And there are places that have done this that have led to incredible results.
I love that rat experiment one, because that had always been parroted as this is the proof positive that these drugs are so terrible for you. But once they figured out that if you take those rats and put them in a wonderful place and they don't have addiction, it really does make you step back and go, okay, what is exactly going on here? Obviously, there's chemical hooks. They are real. Like people that are on sustained, prolonged use of opiates, especially people with back injuries, have an incredibly difficult time kicking them. Even really positive people who don't necessarily have awful lives. But it's one of those things that gets in your head and then you sort of parrot it. You've heard it, you repeat it. But it's the reason why I asked you the question. It's like what is the cause? For most people, you believe it's an unfulfilled life or a painful life or a painful self-image or remorse for your past, or like what is it? Do we have like primary reasons or primary attributes that we attach to these people that are drug addicted?
Yeah, so this was what my more recent book, which is called Lost Connections, Uncovering the Real Causes of Depression and the Unexpected Solutions is about. Because I think the core of addiction is about trying to deal with pain.
Right.
But the causes of human pain are obviously huge. But what I learned is there's scientific evidence for 9 causes of kind of deep despair, right?
Okay.
Now, if you think about depression, and very similar factors play out with addiction, they're actually densely interconnected phenomena. But there are real biological factors, right? Your genes can make you more vulnerable to that, just like some people find it easier to put on weight than others. Right. And there are real brain changes that happen when you become depressed or addicted that can make it harder to get out, right? But most of the factors that are causing this despair are not factors in our biology, they're factors in the way we live. I think it's a kind of, this doesn't cover all of the causes that I learned about for Lost Connections, but it covers a lot of them. Everyone watching your show knows they have natural physical needs, obviously, right? You need food, you need water, you need shelter, you need clean air. Exactly. If I took those things away from you, you'd be fucked really quickly, right? But there's equally strong evidence that all human beings have natural psychological needs, right? You need to feel you belong. You need to feel your life has meaning and purpose. You need to feel that people see you and value you. You need to feel you've got a future that makes sense. And this culture we've built is good at lots of things, and I'm really glad to be alive today for all sorts of reasons. I had to go to the dentist the other day. I'm glad to be alive now, not like 100 years ago. But there's a lot of evidence that we've been getting less and less good at meeting these deep underlying psychological